So hey guys, so welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I have received a lot of requests for me to make this video. So this video today talks about on the process of formulating a bill before the Parliament. But before I proceed to the bill, you will understand that a policy must come before a bill is tabled before the Parliament or the relevant body. Now, listen, we have what we call a policy. And a policy was well defined by the guide to the legislative process in Kenya in 2015, where the former Attorney General Githu Muigai, took part in the drafting of the guide. So I read that guide and drafted the following summary on policy formulation process in Kenya. Then after now this is the policy formulation process. I'm going to take you through the steps of drafting a bill step by step. So let's start. First of all, stage one incorporates of what we call policy initiation stage. What is a policy initiation? First of all, the proponent generates an idea and now informs either the national or county government concerned, who now then will propel the idea to the ministerial level. Now, and the relevant department will then formulate the policy guideline and reduce it to writing for discussion. The following people or bodies are qualified to be a player in policy initiation process as proponents, and they involve stakeholder groups, e.g. the Human Rights Commission, parties, clubs. There is also the citizens part. There is also the government, ministries. There is what we call institutions and stroke agencies. Now, the next step after the policy initiation stage, we have research stage. The relevant department that has been selected now will even at times conduct study visits to ensure that the policy benefits from what we call international or national best practices that have been set to ensure that our policies as a state are international standard, and in doing so, expert opinion is usually sought by this relevant department. And it's important to note that the Kenya Law Reform Commission and the Kenya Institute of Public Policy and Research are very instrumental, as these entities are statutory tasked to assist with that specialized competency level. Moreover, entities that are more likely to be affected by these policies are often also sought and asked to contribute or assist with this specialized area on drafting a policy. Because remember, when they participate, the policy will be incorporated to their department, because they will claim the ownership and acceptability of it will be accepted in our manner. No, the another stage during this process, we have what we call negotiation and public participation. You always hear that when a policy does not engage the people, it has skipped a very vital step when it comes to policy initiation. Now, under stage 3 of negotiation and public participation, we have now the substantive contents of the draft policy being negotiated with various stakeholders. Now, the stakeholders, who are these stakeholders? They come together. We have the national NGOs, we have the public and all interested groups. They come together, they sit and now discuss and negotiate on what to put and what not to put. Now, public participation is provided for in the following ways, e.g. now they can conduct what you call seminars or retreats. They can use the social media and other online platforms or they can also publish the extract in newspaper articles, and also they can call for contribution from the public fora. So you as a citizen, you can send your contribution for it to be added in this public participation stage. Now, after the public participation stage is over, we go to the next stage, and which stage is the finalization of the policy. After proper debate has been carried out on the policy draft, the concerned department crystallizes the issue and options available and finally draws up the final policy document. This concerned department may include e.g. the Public Affairs, the Ministry of Public Affairs. Now we also have, maybe if it concerns matters on tax, we have the KRA department. You see. Now under stage 5, we have now what we call cabinet or county executive committee approval. If the national policy, if it was for national policy that was likely to affect the country involved, the matter is taken before the cabinet. But if the matter was only affecting the county level, the matter is submitted to the county executive committee for approval. At the submitting stage, time, adequate background information, justification, and other salient features of the policy are clearly brought out for an informed decision to be taken. You must provide the specific time, you must provide the background information you want to be included, and justification of why the policy needs to be considered. In addition, the constitutional, if and fiscal is on monetary matters, and other possible implications of the policy are also provided. If that bill, let's say, it will have an impact on the revenue of the country, that's how we call now implication on the fiscal point. Now another stage, we have what we call parliamentary or county assembly approval. This part now, once the policy has been approved, the policy document is tabled in the respective houses for debate and approval in accordance with each house's standing orders. And now the respective legislative body will introduce the policy document in the houses to the relevant house committees for scrutiny and further consideration. So the houses usually assemble themselves into relevant house committees to address on this policy formulation. Now the house committee reports back to the whole house when the policy document may be approved with or without amendments. And further, the House may subject the policy to the public and stakeholders for further consideration. And if that stage passes successfully, we go to the ask stage. Did you know that the president must receive that which has been passed by the speaker of the respective houses for him or her to finally endorse by affixing the national seal or county seal respectively and sign the policy? Remember, this is not a bill or a law. This is still a policy. And after that stage, we go to the publication stage. Upon assent, now the policy is now published as a white paper. That is very relevant, you know. And the executive is expected to widely circulate the policy and to keep the public informed of the likely effects of the policy. The white paper is a statement of intent and a detailed policy plan, which often forms the basis of legislation. This is the starting point of the drafting stage. We have now the next stage we call draft bill. If it is determined at the ministerial level that a new law is necessary to achieve its objective and aid its implementation, the concerned department will now commence the process of drafting the bill to give full effect to the policy directives. Please note that in its early stages before a new law is tabled in the House, it is called a legislative proposal. But once it has been so tabled, it is called a bill. That is very relevant, you know. Now let us go to the stages that require a person to draft a bill. If you find my YouTube channel being captivating to you, before I proceed to the stages of drafting a bill, that is my information. Use that information to contact me, and I can do anything concerning legal education and legal research to you privately. So let's jump into the process now, step by step, of how one must draft a bill in Kenya. At times, it is a question asked during the exams, and most students confuse a lot. They state the steps of writing a policy instead of the steps of writing a bill. Now, how do you draft a bill? Legislative drafting. First of all, we have what we call the table of contents, but a table of contents, you will put it after you have finalized the stages. So what I want you to understand under the table of contents, we have what to say that it is advisable that you use an automatic generated table of content, but if you are creative enough, you can even opt for manual. However, this is how the table of content will look like. We have introduction to the bill, we have problem analysis, policy guidelines, then we have legislative instructions, statement of the problem, objectives of the bill, timeline instructions, preliminary provision, establishment of the authority you want your bill to discuss on, then the measures that you want the authority to apply when it comes to containment of the issue, the problem that the bill is going to address. Then we have the financial provision, because every authority must have finances guiding it. And then we have the final provision. We are going now to tackle each stage one by one. So let us start with the problem analysis, this one here too. So under problem analysis, it is important to note that here you must give a brief background to the problem you have identified. Be specific on the problem, list the main primary source of the law you are relying on, then mention existing laws on the problem. For example, this bill was being drafted. I was in this group while we were drafting this bill. So the problem that we identified first, we discovered that public health emergencies does not have an adequate financial regulatory framework. We discovered that when an emergency occurs, then there is a scandal involving money. So that is a problem that we encountered. We had to produce sources of this problem, where you got this information, but you don't quote the bill. Just get the sources from trusted organization and sources. Then the main primary source of law that we took was the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and most specifically we went with Article 35 that provides every citizen with the right to access information held by the state or information led by another person. So we were mainly dealing with the information held by the state, because they must reveal these budgetary allocations to tenders of people who are being given, like the coronavirus, they were being told to purchase masks. So that is a relevant information to the public. So another thing that I was saying was, now if you look at this bill, we mentioned that presently Kenya did not have any specific legal framework establishing the public health emergency finance mechanism oversight. So now this was just a sample, so don't comment at it exists. No, this was just for creativity. So you have to mention on now, if it does not have that legal framework, there are some legal frameworks that have established or have talked on it, mention those legal frameworks. But you see, you have written here, but none of the above involves the management of any funds to be allocated, nor the transparencies to win the public trust. Even if we have these legal frameworks discussing on public health emergency, there is no specific one talking on how the management of those funds will be made publicized. So another thing we have to discuss on is the policy guidelines. What do you understand by policy guidelines? And here you must mention your main mechanism to advance your policy. The mechanism must be specific and realistic. And lastly, you must provide what you suggest for the policy guideline to be achieved. E.g., for this sample was the creation of a management authority and the use of an improved tender system. So this our main policy guideline mechanism. We selected on now how we will implement a new tender system allocation for transparency, because what we discovered that was the main hindrance to this public health management funds was the transparency part, and transparency will only be allowed if we came up with a good tender system. Let's say the publication of the tender system to be made available in the government website. See, so that's our main legal mechanism, the policy guideline that we opt to go with. So, and still under that policy guideline, you must state that the authority shall have the following powers: the power to prohibit or forbid any fund before appropriation is passed by this authority. It's important you state that power to investigate and sue any individual involved in the investment of the provided funds. That will also promote a good tender system. So it is important that you state that. Now let us jump into the legislative instructions. I hope you are still following correctly on what I'm doing. So under this legislative instruction, I want to state what it generally trains, because this is the largest part when it comes to drafting a bill in Kenya. So watch out this part, as the person giving instruction is not the person drafting. Remember, you are only drafting this legislative instruction in order to be given this, in order for these instructions to be given to a person who now will sit down and follow what you have instructed him or her to do. Note that the contents of legislative instructions is a frequently examined essay, and the following are the contents. Number one, we have what we call a proposed legislation, i.e. we have a title, either short or long. That is just a proposed title. We have a sponsoring department or ministry. Which ministry is it sponsoring this bill? If it's on female gender-based violence, we have FIDA. This is generally provided because to know whether the sponsoring institution has the mandate to give such instructions, it is important that you state the sponsoring department is well versed with the policy regulation framework in Kenya. So, and we have now another part, we have department, stroke ministry, contact officer. You can provide the name, you can even provide the phone number, where if this person drafting the bill drafter now encounters a problem, will reach out to this person who had given these instructions. Then we also have date of cabinet approval on principle. It's important that you tabulate the date you want this policy. You want this bill to be tabled before the cabinet for approval. And then we have the main objective of the proposed legislation. Every legislation must have an objective. What will be your main objective? Provide also that main objective. Don't worry, we are going to go through all these parts under the legislative instructions. Then we have practical implications of the proposal. Will it increase number of fraud accidents? Will it reduce the numbers of extrajudicial killings in Kenya? Will it reduce the levels of corruption? State that practical implication. Then, do you know that the next step that you are required under legislative instructions is the unresolved issues relating from consultations with other agencies or departments? What are these unresolved issues? What did you encounter while you were doing that research under the policy initiation stages? What legal advice did you receive? Did you receive any advice from the Attorney General? Attach it to the person who will be drafting the bill. Remember, all this information, you are not bringing it under the final product, but you are giving the information to the person drafting this bill. So another thing, what are the level of penalties, if any, that a person can accrue if they does not follow in the policies that you have tabled before this person drafting the bill? Then you should also provide for acts or statutes to be amended or repealed. Sometimes some policies will have an effect to existing laws or will interfere in some way in future with maybe a bill that has already been proposed in Parliament. It is the duty of you as a researcher to first look at the bills or acts that are going to be affected by this new policy. You want it to become a bill, and finally to enact, and tell the person drafting as an instruction, please note that this policy or draft of a bill, it will have an impact on this act, which etc. Mention those acts. And then another thing we must provide for the one drafting this bill, transition or saving provision. It is important where as it is taking an existing function and what happens to the staff documents under it, assets and liabilities. You remember, transitional or saving provisions are enable the drafter to understand where this policy is coming from. So if this policy is coming from the financial angle, it is important for you to tell this drafter that this bill will likely to have an impact on, let's say, levies, miscellaneous levies and fees Act of 2016, and it will likely affect this to affect these sections. Therefore, you want it to transit in this way. It is important that you tell the drafter the way you want this bill to save or transit to one to another. What will happen to the liabilities? What will happen to the staff under that authority? And this bill viewers will affect that existing authority. Tell him. Proposed commencement date. What is the date that you want it to start? What is the proposal date that you are giving? Other department consulted. What departments have you consulted before you to tabulate this matter? What is the proposed timetable you want to be used? And other matters, including relevant background information, stroke reports. Maybe you have a report that the drafter is not aware of. Provide this report and make it be available now to him. Then you have what we call this is a brief summary of the problem, statement of the problem. Under legislative instructions, we have what we call statement of the problem. Now, this is a brief summary of a problem. You know, sometimes a bill drafter will not have that time to go through all your bill, but will go directly to the statement of the problem and understand where you're coming from. So if this bill was touching on embezzlement of public funds during public health emergencies, it is important I just read it directly in this part. Then we have what we call objectives of a bill, as I discussed earlier. Every bill must have a main objective. This is a list of objectives that this bill is going to tackle on and handle. Now we have the timeline instructions. This is the time you want the bill to be tabled before, let's say, the Parliament. Let's say the bill shall have been presented before the legislature, before the next financial budget has been read to the public. Because if your bill is likely to have a fiscal implication, it is important you set the timeline instructions, because maybe the next budget can be read and yet your bill has been assented into by the president and become an act, and yet your authority has not been issued with the funds to implement now what you had wanted this bill to discuss on. Now another part the students also confused. We have now what we call a long title. And a long title is a part of the act and is used to interpret the act. Now this a bill for this must state an act of Parliament to provide for effective responses to public health emergencies, financial management, stroke, spread of infectious disease, stroke, establish the public emergency authority. It is important to note that it indicates the general purpose and intention of the legislation that is coming to be passed. It should be wide enough to embrace the entire content of the bill, as in I can just see what you want to address within a blink of an eye. So another point I want you to note is, you see there I have highlighted on it an enactment enacted by Parliament of Kenya as follows. That part enacted by Parliament is known as the enacting formula. This states that the legislative authority has agreed to the measures as provided for in that law. The appropriate enacting formula depends on the Constitution. This is a requirement. It acknowledges the authority of Parliament as the sole making body in Kenya. That is important as a student, don't leave that part. Then we now go to the preliminary provisions as part 1 of the bill. Now, this bill may be cited as the Public Health Emergency Finance Bill 2022. That part has been highlighted. What is the meaning of that part? This is the entire title by which an act is known. We use the word may to give discretion to the Attorney General where necessary to change the title and give the act a chapter number to eliminate the year of enactment. The year in which the act is enacted is usually found in the short title. So remember, I've said this bill may be cited. The word may is used in order to give the discretion of the Attorney General to either change even the title of that act later, even after it has been assented into by the Parliament. This is allowed in order to give room for the expansion of various legislation that can be added in future. Then we have an interpretation section. Just an interpretation section is simple and does not give students a lot of difficulties. Every legislation under this part should contain an interpretation section which sets out the definition of various words. This section encourages consistencies and allows for avoidance of unnecessary repetition. Then I told you every bill must have an objective. So this is a summary of the objective. For instance, this bill sought to provide a legal framework for effectiveness as a response to public health emergencies. The bill was also objectified to provide measures to curb spread of infectious disease, etc. Then, a person performing any function under this bill shall be guided by the following principles. It is important that you state the principles under which people will be bound by this bill or act after it has been assented. We have integrity, transparency, selflessness, and objectivity and impartiality in making decisions. Remember, this bill is a highly sensitive bill because it is likely to touch on people who embezzle public money. So we want transparency and accountability as part of the principle. We want it to bound those people. And then part number 2, it is the establishment of the Public Health Authority. This part, no challenges were reported here because it just merely establishes the authority that will now handle the implementation of this bill or act. It states the duties, then membership and qualifications for membership. Be keen not to forget that a person is entitled to be elected the chair after meeting the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. This is because after every authority once has been able to be formed, we also have what we call qualifications, and you said that the authority shall be a corporate body with ability to enter into contracts when be sued. The functions, it's also important to state the function that the authority is going to conduct, membership of the authority, who are these persons to form this authority, who are these persons that will be qualified to take part in that authority, what degree should they hold, years of experience. Fulfillment of Chapter 6 of the Constitution is a mandatory one because every public body, every public vacancy in Kenya, you must be in alignment with Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Then the chairperson, what are the qualifications of a chairperson? Then we go to the part 3. Just part 3 is not that difficult because this part now forms the mechanism in the policy guidelines part. Now you see why I said your mechanism must be specific, because otherwise this part will make you see light after you are out of an example. Yes, you can be told to draft a sample bill in your exams, and most people find it difficult to maneuver at this stage because maybe you chose the wrong policy guideline mechanism, and part 3 requires you now to be creative enough to put that mechanism that you selected into consideration and table it before the paper. So part 3, you see, our policy guideline was on how we can use the tender system to be in an effective manner. So we had to be creative in creation of bank accounts, receipts, dues. So that is generally a creativity part of a student, and it is usually tested. Now, but for financial profession, you remember every authority shall have members inside, and the members will require remunerations. So it's important to state that where the source of these funds of the authority will be gotten from. Let's say money will be allocated by Parliament through the national budget, maybe gifts through donations, and any other funds allocated through appropriation and approved by Parliament. The relevance of you putting this part is because you don't want the authority to be engaged in what we call money laundering. Money laundering is a crime in Kenya, and it's the crime will be addressed. I will address the crime in a separate video, and I will outline on various steps of how people hide when they commit these white-collar crimes. It is a very sensitive crime, and very smart people engage in that crime. Now, we also have the financial year. What was the timetable you wanted this bill to take effect? What is the annual? So the next part I was saying was on final provision part. This part outlines the punishment for mismanagement of the funds that you have outlined above. Just create some punishments you want this person to be subjected to. And now we have what we call Memorandum of Objects and Reason. This part shows a brief summary to clauses of the bill. Check the last paragraph, as one must state whether the bill concerns national or county governments. So you see, you state just clause 1 contains the short title, clause 2 definitions of the terms. This is just a brief summary of what every clause entails, as you can see. Now, finally, I have told you that make sure that the final part has outlined whether the bill concerns county government or the national government, and who is the person who tabled this matter before the relevant body, the relevant house. My name is Victor Ngaruya. I'm the leader of Majority Party, and in this channel, that was the step of how one ought to draft a bill in Kenya. Thank you for your time. Please subscribe and follow for more.